Where should Apple assemble the iPhone? Group 4. I'd like to start off by sharing highlights of Apple and the global smartphone market. By the end of this year, 44.9% of the world's population is expected to own a smartphone. The smartphone industry is highly competitive. Every year, in a battle for market share, companies pour billions of dollars into developing their technology to gain a competitive advantage. Between 2018 and 2019, Apple invested $117 billion on technological research and development. The 2020 global market share rankings: Samsung, Apple, Huawei, and Xiaomi. Although Samsung tops the global market, Apple actually captures a majority of the industry's profit. For example, in 2019, Apple captured 66%, while Samsung only captured 17%. Despite coming in second globally, Apple continues to dominate the US market. Designed in California, but made in China, Apple has continued to outsource its components, mainly due to the flexibility of Asian factories and their ability to rapidly and massively produce parts. Bet you didn't know. In 2007, Steve Jobs decided that he wanted a glass screen for the iPhone, only a few weeks before it launched. While American suppliers said the deadline was impossible, a factory in China started construction even before signing a contract. When the deal was sealed, workers were given a biscuit and tea and started to produce the 10,000 iPhones a day. Should Apple move its iPhone production to Indonesia or Mexico? As a group, we decided to analyze both Indonesia and Mexico as prospective countries. An introduction to Indonesia. Currently, Indonesia holds the world's fourth largest population of smartphone users at 78 million, behind China. Most of these smartphone devices are imported rather than manufactured in the country. To close their growing trade deficit, the Indonesian government requires manufacturers to use 30% of local content in their devices. With such a massive consumer market and the Indonesian government's continuous efforts to limit cell phone imports, moving our production to Indonesia would allow us to capitalize on the nearly 140 million projected consumers. Here's Anna Marie with a deeper dive into Indonesia's business infrastructure.
Thanks, Monica. I'm going to start by discussing how Indonesia's business infrastructure is ready for an Apple transfer. Indonesia currently has 9 free trade agreements with over 15 countries, including every country in the Asian Register, several countries in the Middle East, and Australia and New Zealand. They also have other agreements in progress with several countries in South America, Europe, and Central Asia. The majority of these trade agreements either completely reduce tariffs to none or by over 90%, which is incredibly beneficial. Indonesia also has special economic zones, which are areas throughout the country that are designed to become business and industrial centers for foreign and domestic investment. They also provide tax incentives, exemptions, and postpone import duties and more for companies that are willing to invest. Indonesia also has an intellectual property rights systems in place, which we know has been an issue for Apple and other companies in China and would be incredibly beneficial. Finally, they have partners present in the area, including Pegatron, which is a massive producer of chips for Apple iPhones. They currently have a $40 million plant in Batam, and they're investing $1 billion over the course of the next few years. How Indonesia's labor market caters to Apple's needs? Well, they offer some of the lowest wages in the world. With a minimum wage of 1/10 that of the United States and one that's also 30% lower than China, there's already a financial benefit to this move. In addition, they have very high productivity. In 2016, it was measured at a growth of 3.6%, where China's was measured at 2%. And they have an elastic supply of unskilled workers, which we know are very important for manufacturing, and a growing skilled labor force among Asian Oceanic countries, which can be beneficial in terms of innovation and future expansion in the area. There are some precautions that Apple does want to consider when looking at Indonesia for this move, though. Those two being corruption and child labor. Unfortunately, corruption has permeated the government and local municipalities by way of bribery, exploitation of ambiguous legislation, and poor legal enforcement. While Indonesia has tried for a while to get a handle on these issues, they are still working on them. In addition, they do have child labor that's very prominent in the area, which is facilitated in part by these very low wages. However, this could be an area where Apple can actually benefit because by paying Indonesians the minimum wage, which they currently aren't making, it would actually raise how much money they make and in turn their quality of life and potentially allow for children to go to school rather than having to work to provide for their family's survival. How would this move be made easy? Well, Indonesia already has a massive consumer market that's projected to grow up to 140 million users by 2030. They also have 4G connectivity in the region that's extensive, as you can see from the graphic provided. The majority of their 4G connectivity does come in the very densely populated areas, but they do still have very high percentages of connectivity even out in the less populated areas. Geographically speaking, Indonesia is also very close to China, which makes the partnerships, the maintenance of partnerships very easy.
So how does Mexico's political climate potentially attract Apple? Well, first, I want to take a look at some of the good things that actually might attract Apple there. One of the first things being is AMLO, which happened to be the initials of the president of Mexico. He's Institute of Social and Anti-Corruption and Crime Fighting Initiatives. One of those initiatives being the Financial Intelligence Unit, which aims to fight corruption within the government. Another one of those things is the fair protection for foreign investors. So Mexico knows that in order for their economy to perform well, that they need to be able to attract foreign investment there who want to set up manufacturing there. So in order to do that, they know that they have to have fair protection laws in place in order to be able to attract different type of companies around the globe. And the last thing being the USMCA. So the USMCA actually took over for NAFTA in July. And one of the things that it aims to do specifically with Mexico is to improve the democracy and to strengthen the rule of law within Mexico. Now let's take a look at some of the bad that's actually going on in Mexico that could potentially detract Apple from wanting to go there. The first thing being is the legal system is very inefficient and is subject to political interference. The next thing being it's highly corrupt with vote buying and payments to government officials. So Mexico scored a 29 out of 100 on the CPI index and ranked 130th out of 180 countries. So a score of a 29 is pretty low. The average on a global scale is about a score of a 43. Could Mexico's emerging economy benefit Apple? Well, first, let's take a look at the pros and cons. So the first pro being low wages. So Mexico's wages have stayed relatively low, while China's has relatively gone up considerably over the past few years. The next pro being the labor market. So Mexico graduates about 114,000 new engineers every year, and they currently have about 3 million people who are already working in their manufacturing sector. So there's plenty of talent to go around if a new company wanted to come in. The last pro being is an emerging market. There is huge growth potential there. So now let's take a look at some of the cons. So the first con being huge debt. So Mexico has a very large amount of debt, and typically what you want to see with an emerging economy is very low debt. So this could definitely deter Apple or any other company from wanting to invest in Mexico. So the last con being high market volatility. So over 70% of Mexico's GDP comes from their exports. So they're at the mercy of their trade partners. So as you see, looking at the graph here, their GDP has dropped drastically within the past year, and that's mostly due because of COVID. Also, their inflation is dropped.
Thank you, Tevin. Violent crime is a serious concern in Mexico. Drug trafficking organizations provoke brutal violence across the nation and earn revenues exceeding $20 billion yearly. Other operations include extortion, kidnapping, human trafficking, robbery, and other illicit activities. In 2006, Mexico declared war on these organizations, implementing a kingpin strategy to incapacitate numerous top leaders. This strategy fragmented the organizations and resulted in proliferation of new gangs and the replacement of existing leaders with even more violent ones. The number of major drug traffic organizations in Mexico has increased from 4 in 2006 to over 9 today. 13 years later, President Obrador declares an end to Mexico's war on drugs. However, data suggests the situation is just getting worse. 2019 and 2020 have been the deadliest in Mexican history and have resulted in an intentional homicide rate 6 times that of the world average. To make matters worse, impunity rates in Mexico are estimated to be between 96 and 98%, making it almost impossible for victims to receive justice. Our analysis concludes that Indonesia is a more advantageous business environment for Apple than Mexico. We'd like to highlight the intellectual property protection laws, the government incentives for FDI, the low corporate tax rate, their already established partners in the country, a low minimum wage, and a highly productive economy. However, we would like to caution Apple and encourage them to take measures to prevent child labor practices. Finally, we'd like to conclude by wishing everybody best of luck on their final exam. Thank you very much for attending our presentation and for an amazing semester.